American Chinese food has become a staple around the world, with restaurants offering everything from egg rolls to General Tso's chicken. But what many people might not know is that much of what is considered Chinese food is actually a product of the 1960s and 1970s. During this time, Chinese takeout restaurants began to proliferate in New York City's black working-class neighborhoods. These restaurants were often family-run operations and offered affordable, filling meals that could be eaten on the go. This cuisine, known as American Chinese food, owes much of its popularity to African Americans. According to Philip Mlynar's article How the Chinese Food Became an NYC Staple, the relationship between African Americans and Chinese food goes back to the 1800s, when Chinese immigrants worked alongside African Americans in the South. By the early 1900s, Chinese restaurants began opening in New York City's Chinatown, but they were largely catering to other Chinese immigrants. It wasn't until the 1920s that Chinese restaurants began to target African American customers. Cities were often overwhelmed with the surge of black migrants, and they settled into crowded apartment buildings with very meager cooking facilities. These conditions made home cooking a challenge, and fortunately relief organizations, restaurants, street vendors, and urban black churches were there to meet the needs of a hungry public. Adrian Miller, in his article, An Illustrated History of Soul Food, writes, because everyone who wasn't Anglo-Saxon white was forced to live in close proximity in segregated sections of town, African Americans encountered global immigrants and were early adopters of Chinese, chop suey, pork fried rice, Italian, macaroni, pizza, spaghetti, and Tex-Mex, chili, enchiladas, far before the mainstream American public. These early Chinese food restaurants often had chop suey on the menu, a dish that was created specifically for African American customers and was made from whatever ingredients were on hand. African American patrons of Chinese restaurants helped popularize certain dishes, such as chop suey and egg foo young, which were adapted to suit their tastes. In turn, Chinese immigrants began incorporating certain African American ingredients, such as fried chicken and collard greens, into their dishes. However, it wasn't just chop suey that caught on with African American customers. Restaurants in Harlem and other predominantly African American neighborhoods began to put their own spin on Chinese cuisine, creating dishes like fried rice, kung pao chicken, and beef and broccoli. These dishes became so popular that they eventually made their way back to China, where they are now considered part of American Chinese food. Yong Chen's article The Rise of Chinese Food in the United States provides a broader perspective on the history of Chinese food in America. Chen explains that Chinese immigrants first began opening restaurants in the United States in the mid-19th century, but these restaurants were often met with hostility and discrimination. It wasn't until the 20th century that Chinese food, in black neighborhoods, began to gain widespread popularity. One of the reasons for this popularity was the development of fried rice, chop suey, and other dishes that were tailored to African American tastes. But as Mlynar's article points out, it was the African American community that really helped to popularize Chinese food in the United States. African American customers not only created their own unique dishes, but they also helped to spread the word about Chinese food to other communities. This popularity has even spread beyond the United States. American Chinese food is now a global phenomenon, with restaurants serving up dishes like fried rice, orange chicken, and moose shoe pork in countries like Canada, Australia, and the UK. However, as Chen's article notes, these dishes can vary widely from one country to another. The history of American Chinese food is a fascinating one, with contributions from both Chinese immigrants and African Americans. The influence of African American cuisine on the American Chinese food menu is just one example of how different culinary traditions can come together to create something new and exciting, and how food can serve as a powerful symbol of cultural exchange and integration.